Hey everyone, Chris Lewis from Fox 47's Digital Newsroom. I'm live at the Capitol for our Michigan History Throwbacks. And today we are with Valerie Marvin, who is the Chief Historian and Curator here at the Capitol. We're going to be talking about a number of things that you do not know about the Capitol.
We're going to talk a little bit today about the history of Capitol Square, which is what we call the grounds of the state Capitol building. Capitol Square was actually set aside by the state as the future site of our Capitol in 1847. That's the same year the legislature voted to move the Capitol from Detroit to Lansing, or should I say Lansing Township. Lansing Township at the time was home to only 8 registered voters, which probably means there were only about 8 white families living in the area, because at the time only white males over 21 could vote. Now, there are many reasons they chose to move. Detroit, of course, sits on an international border, and it was also the state's largest city. There were a lot of people who wanted to see more development in this part of the state. So we moved the Capitol to Lansing, and we selected 2 sites. This site was the highest portion of downtown Lansing as we know it today, so this was set aside for the big grand Capitol we wanted to build in the future. But the truth is, we only had about 3 months to build our second Capitol building. So that was built across the street on the block that's bordered by Capitol, Washington, Allegan, and Washtenaw. And that was a very simple building, only 2 stories tall, was made of wood, painted white with green shutters. And to be honest, everyone who worked in it hated it from day one because it was too small. In fact, only a few years later in 1853, the legislature voted to build a second building that was a brick office building here on this piece of land. Now, it probably wasn't our finest moment in terms of planning for the future, because we would actually have to tear that building down then before we could build the current Capitol, which meant we had to build a second office building on a different location to put all of those people who had been working in it. But it speaks to the fact that as soon as the Capitol was placed in Lansing, downtown started to grow up. Churches started to form, businesses came in, boarding houses and hotels were established, and everything was always centered right around this piece of ground. This is the very heart of the city. Now, as you look around the grounds today, it's about 11 acres in total. And it's always been a very big open space. And part of this was for safety's sake. We wanted this building to be removed from everything else. So if there was ever a fire in downtown Lansing, it would be safe. That's one reason this building is considered fireproof in a 19th century sense, because it doesn't sit right next to something else. We also wanted to have big open grounds so people could enjoy them. This building and the grounds belong to every single person who lives in Michigan, and we wanted to give people opportunities to come and enjoy it. And they have from day one. When the building was under construction in the 1870s, people would come in and bring picnics, and they would watch the construction. People come to hold rallies, to advocate for things that are important to them. That's a very important part of what we do here at the Capitol. One of the most interesting things that I think has ever happened here was actually when we laid our cornerstone back in 1873. And I'd like to take you over and take a closer look at that piece. One of the biggest events we've hosted on Capitol Square actually took place back in 1873 when the building was under construction. We broke ground in 1872, and 1 year later, on October 2nd, we officially laid the Capitol's cornerstone, which is right here behind me. Now, architecturally speaking, a cornerstone is really important because that gives you an official place that you can measure everything else off of. But of course, we already knew what the dimensions of the building were going to be and had the foundations in place. So our cornerstone is more decorative. Now, that event that day brought in 30,000 people from across Michigan. This is at a time when Lansing was home to only about 5,000. So everybody who lived in the city was strongly encouraged to open their homes to visitors, and all sorts of churches and organizations prepared a lot of food to make sure that everyone would have something to eat while they were in town. There was a parade in which several people marched that actually came here to Capitol Square. And we know exactly who was in that. We know who attended because Alan Bors, who was the secretary of the State Building Commission, put together something called the New Capitol, the Laying of the Cornerstone. This was a commemorative book that was published in 1873. He tells us that our architect was here, Elijah Myers, our governor, John Bagley, the legislature, our state officers, which those were like department heads, they all came here together to celebrate. Now, at the time we put the cornerstone in, it didn't look quite like it does today. Of course, it doesn't match the rest of the building. That's intentional. We wanted it to stand out. Most of the Capitol is faced in sandstone. This is actually granite that was quarried out in Massachusetts. And when it was put into place, only 7 of the 8 digits were cut into it. For good reason, of course, because we didn't quite know when the project was going to end. So when you look at pictures from the period, it says 1872 and 187 blank over here. And actually, it's a good thing we didn't hedge our bets, because initially they were hoping it would only take 5 years to construct the building, and ultimately it took 6. Now, John Bagley, who was our governor, spoke at the dedication of the cornerstone, just as it was about to be officially laid. And he had this to say. Fellow citizens, in the name of the constituted authorities of the state, I bid you welcome to its capital. We have assembled for the purpose of laying the cornerstone of a new Capitol building worthy of our state, a fitting home for the different branches of its government. To those of us who have watched the growth of Michigan from infancy to manhood, the occasion recalls the toils and trials of early days, the anxieties and cares of pioneer life, while a pardonable egotism, as we look about us, tells of battles fought and victories won over nature in her most rugged mood. Today we stand here as conquerors of forest and swamp and can proudly say, if thou seekest a beautiful peninsula, behold it here. And of course, that's a reference actually to the state's motto. Now, we laid the cornerstone in 1873, but what most people don't know is we actually opened it up over 100 years later. In 1978, we celebrated the Year of the Capitol, and Governor Milliken actually presided over the opening of the cornerstone. Unfortunately, when we opened it up, we discovered that water had leaked in, and most of the documents that were put inside had been ruined. But the next year, in 1979, we actually put new objects in the cavity, and we relaid it and put it back in place. So we need everyone to mark their calendars for 2078 or 79. That's the next time we plan to open the cornerstone again. And we have no doubt that it will be another wonderful celebration here on Capitol Square.